In this edition of FSW Conversations, I am speaking with Chiara Marconi, an Italian entrepreneur and co-founder of lingerie brand Chitè Milano. With a background in diplomatic studies, she has become a prominent figure in fashion, empowering women through personalized, handmade designs. After closing and selling Chitè, Chiara is currently working as a strategic consultant for fashion and consumer goods brands. Thank you so much for joining me today, Chiara. I've been really looking forward to this discussion. And let's go ahead and jump right in it if we could. So what initially inspired you to enter luxury fashion in Italy? And what unique challenges did you anticipate as you were getting your project, Chitè Milano, off the ground?
So first of all, thank you, Bryce, for having me today. I'm really excited to talk a little bit about Chitè in the United States and my experience in building a company. It has been a very long, tough, and at the same time exciting journey because it all started when I was working at the United Nations. So very far from the fashion industry, but I realized that I was surrounded by women that I knew that had the potential to achieve whatever they wanted in their life, but as it happens almost all the time, we as women are stopped by our insecurities, and our insecurities are mostly related to the perception that we have of our body. I discovered that 97% of women they declare that they have at least one negative thought about their body image every single day. And so I started investigating a little bit more, and I discovered that by far the most common plastic surgery in the world is the breast surgery. And in Italy, the age has dramatically fallen. We're talking about people, the overage age of women requesting to undergo plastic surgery is 18 years. So it's super
Mm.
young. By discovering this, we investigated together with my friend that then became the co-founder, Federica. We investigated through it, and we realized that there was actually an opportunity in the underwear market to build a brand that was able to help women not only beginning to love again their body, but getting to know better their body and their breast. We investigated the industry. We realized that there was also a gap in the market, especially in the premium slash affordable luxury segment. And this is where we decided to position our brand since the very beginning and build what then became a company of almost 25 people working all together.
Wow, that's a fantastic story, Chiara. But in Italy, I think that there's a kind of a perception that the regulatory environment can be difficult, especially for kind of a woman-owned business. So can you talk a little bit about how that sort of shaped your kind of journey and what kind of allowed you to stand out in the marketplace?
I would lie if I'd say that it has been easy. Building a company, not necessarily a brand, but just building a company in Italy is extremely complex.
Yeah.
And I was expecting some challenges. I was not expecting all of them. I knew that building a brand, building something with a strong brand identity, the positioning of the brand, building a community, they were all challenges, but we were ready to take those challenges. What we were not expecting was for example, the startup environment in Italy, which is very different from the United States because they look at the United States. So the investors in Italy, they expect to get the same returns, but they're willing to invest maybe 10 times less the amount of money. So you find yourself building a startup with pretty much no money and no real support with an extremely competitive environment on one hand. So, if building a company is already complex in Italy because of the bureaucracy, for example, the regulations and all that, it becomes even harder when you have to build a startup. That said, I'm not saying that I would not suggest to do it. It has been by far the most exciting experience in my life, but it is complex. And probably if I knew at the beginning how complex it would have been, I would have probably never jumped into it. So, from my point of view,
Mm.
being a little bit naive at the beginning, it's actually a good thing. And I would like to say one more thing. Again, we in Italy, we look up a lot at the United States, and we tend to adopt the same mentality that you have in terms of failure. If you're not failing, means you're not growing. And investors are always looking for people, for entrepreneurs who have failed at least once. But what people do not know at the beginning is that if you fail in Italy, your life is pretty much over.
Yeah.
because of the bureaucracy, because of all the regulations that are related to someone who sails in Italy. So you need to be careful. But from my point of view, if you build a company in Italy, then it will be easier to build a company anywhere else. So I always look for the glass always empty.
Oh, listen, I think that's a fantastic overview of some of the challenges that any entrepreneur in Italy faces. Jessica and I, we're huge fans of Chitè and always were. So it's really interesting, I think, to hear you had a great experience, but you went into it not knowing for sure exactly what the challenges were going to be. And in retrospect, you're not sure you would do that again. Am I understanding that correctly? Or is there different things you would have done differently, at least in terms of navigating the environment?
So the good thing is that if I had to start a new company now, it would probably take me 6 months building what I built in, I don't know, the first 3 years of Chitè, because you have much more experience. And I do get the
Right.
point when investors say abroad, when foreign investors, they say, I would love to invest in second times founders because the
Right.
experience that you build is something extremely valuable. Of course, I could write a book about all the things that I would like to make differently.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I wouldn't do it again. I would probably do it again. For sure, I'm not ready now to launch a new company. I would like to move into a more into the corporate field or move on the other side of the road, like try to work with investment funds, because I think it
Right.
would allow me to get a 360 overview. But this is talking about me. More in general, if I had to give a suggestion, you can take this from two perspectives. The first one is, if you manage to get things working in Italy, then it would probably be much easier elsewhere. But I would probably start abroad and then step in Italy in a second time. Because the thing is that Italy is really complex, and at the same time is not a market as huge as the United States.
Yeah.
But still, especially if we're talking about luxury, it gives you a huge potential in terms of positioning. From my point of view, if you manage to position your brand in the luxury industry in Italy, then it's like a big flag that you have achieved. So you conquer that, everything else in their terms is going to be easier.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And from a business perspective, there's a glib line that luxury is made in Italy and maybe sold in France. And I think that kind of touches upon some of the constraints that you faced on the business side, but it also points to why Italy is the home to luxury, right? This is a place where many of these brands originated, but you have the craftsmanship, you have the depths of knowledge there, you have the talent there, the production side. Is that perception correct? That look, if you apart from the regulatory environment, if you want to create a luxury brand, you rely upon the those top layers of that supply chain to put together these creative designs and manufacture them in a way that meets consumer expectations for what a luxury product should be. That Italy is still the home for that type of process. Is that perception correct in your view?
Absolutely, yes. 100% yes. In Italy, we have an heritage that is invaluable from my point of view. Just think that when we first opened Chitè, we knew nothing whatsoever about underwear, about building a product, about building a bra. We knew nothing. And we always say that Victoria's Secret had its own angels. Our angels were our artisans, most of them were
Right.
females. So our supply chain was mostly made by a lot of women, and they taught us everything. The seamstresses, so the craftsmen who worked for Chitè, they used to work for huge brands like Chanel, Versace, Gucci, Armani, all of them. So they treat their job as an art. And
Right.
what really was inspiring is that you can see that they truly love their job. It's a strong passion for them. When nowadays, you see videos of the production, the productivity environment in of Shein or all those really low mass brands. And it's easy for me to compare with what I saw. Of course, I'm not talking about
Yeah.
the Dior atelier of everyone wearing
Right.
white gloves, but the passion that these women they put or men they put in their job is invaluable. So I know, for example, a few international brands that they create their line, so all the prototypes and the basic collection, they do it in Italy. Then they move the production elsewhere because, of course, it's cheaper. But in terms of know-how, Italy is the right place to be.
Right. And then you point to, you know, one of the Achilles heels of developing not just in Italy, but any, kind of advanced market, and that's balancing costs with quality expectations. And, the issue of cost, the issue of pricing has been certainly very important in the last year or so. So just from your experience, how does that balance get struck so that, look, you can still have an authentic, a developed, a well-designed luxury product, but still one that is reachable to price-wise to consumers that are not just at the very highest level of the income distribution?
So I'm a woman of number, and in Chitè, my role was always because my business partner Federica, she was the creative designer. She had the whole style team under her, and my job was to step into their meetings and saying, "Guys, it's all very cool. It's all super beautiful, but can we afford it? How
Yeah.
pricey is it going to be? Are clients going to buy it?" Which, from my perspective, is a bias that it's a problem sometimes young brands phase when they launch the brand, because when a young brand is launched by, for example, a fashion designer that comes out of fashion schools, they know that of course, they are artists, but they're not able to work from a number wise point of view. And that is fundamental. My motto has always been know your numbers. The challenges that we faced is that we were a B Corp certified brand, meaning that everything we produced was done in a sustainable manner. And sustainable products, sustainable fabrics, it are more expensive. They're still more expensive, and they're harder to find. So there was price wise, there was the first issue. The second issue is always, especially in the underwear industry, is that women have no clue whatsoever how many pieces lies behind a bra. I didn't know either. I thought it was you find a fabric and maybe a couple of elastics and an underwear and it's done. And people do not know that behind a single bra there can be up to 13 different suppliers, and the steps that the seamstresses need to make to build a bra are up to 28, 29 different steps. So it's very complex. And you need to find a balance. And especially at the beginning, it's quite complex because you have MOQs, so you have minimum order quantities.
Yeah.
When you're a small brand, this is a challenge that you need to face. And the only way that we found to overcome this was by showing up, me and Federica, showing our faces and saying, look, it's me and her. We just launched a brand. This is what we want to do. This is our vision. If you do you believe in us? If you believe in us, are you willing to make a leap of faith as we did and provide us with some support? And this is what we did. And during the COVID time, we were one of the few brands in Italy, especially in our industry, so underwear and beachwear, that according to our suppliers, they were raising the amount of orders rather than diminishing them. So at the end of the day, entrepreneurships comes hand in hand together with human relationships from my point of view.
How do you generate that visibility? You have such a great story that you've identified, but how do you kind of surface that and make sure that women can find that story and could engage with your product?
That was absolutely one of our main focus. And
Mm.
to be honest, the communication of our brand is still something that, if I look back in time, I'm not um, happy with. But apparently, it's because me and my business partner, we used to be hyper perfectionist. And
Yeah.
because when I realized, especially when we closed and sold the brand, we were literally surrounded by love. We received over 300 emails from clients sending us emails about their personal stories with our underwear, with our bras, and we there were queues outside our shops when we sent out the message that we were officially closing the brand. So um, at the highest point of let's say the difficult times, we realized that what we built was a success. So in retrospective, I thought a lot about what we built and how we built it. Probably the most important thing for us was building a peer-to-peer relationship. So
Right.
clients were able to see Chitè not as a brand that was away from them, and not as a brand there was some sort of like separation or distance between them and the brand, but rather they were pretty much seeing the brand as if it was a person or a friend. Brands that were texting us, they were writing us messages in DM on Instagram and TikTok. And if I have to think about it, I'm a client of luxury brand, but I've never sent a DM to Prada or any luxury brands. And
Yeah.
clients were doing that with us. We decided, not at the very beginning, but after a while, also to put our faces in the communication of the brand. Me and Federica, but the whole team in general. And this turned out to be something like a winning decision because people were actually stopping us on the street and saying, I've already seen you. And they were like, oh my God, yes, you're from the Chitè team. Oh, I love you. And we literally opened the door of our brand, of our offices. People nowadays are looking for authenticity. They want to know, what do you do? How do you do it? What do you believe in? Who's working behind that? Who's making their clothes? What stories lies behind the brand? So pretty much what we did was absolutely reducing the distances between the brand and the community, but at the same time, working hard in terms of PR, brand positioning, digital marketing, influencer marketing on the positioning on the brand of the brand.
Yeah, you've hit upon what all brands, however big and small, are trying to achieve, and that is to convey authenticity to their customers. And I think that to varying degree of success. And I think this has been a bad year for luxury just generally. And I think one of the elements that commentators have used to indict the industry is that there's a certain lack of authenticity, that it feels very corporate. It feels very much like big businesses raising prices and not connecting with consumers. So I think that you appear to have hit upon really a bit of magic in being able to convey what is an amazing story, and you've managed to articulate it in a way so other people could join that universe of how you wanted to sell your brand and kind of project yourself in the marketplace. And we encountered your brand on Instagram. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how successfully you could use social media to project that brand, including to audiences outside of Italy.
Oh, first of all, thank you. I actually remember very well one of your first orders because at that time we didn't have a fulfillment center yet. So it was me, I was personally shipping some of the products to clients. So this is how I got to know a few of our most loved clients. And then, of course, we moved to a fulfillment center because otherwise it was absolutely undoable. Let me give you an example. Before talking about social media, which is one of the most important things from my point of view, when we're talking about authenticity, and you were saying the issue of raising prices and inflation,
Yeah,
we faced the same issue because right after COVID, all the prices of raw materials, they started rising and rising.
yeah,
And we faced the situation. So either we lowered our margin, which is something that
yeah,
we did, but at the same time, we need to find a sustainability for our own businesses because we need to pay the team. And on the other hand, we didn't absolutely want to touch the prices of the supply chain. The raw materials were higher, but along the value chain, there are the seamstresses and the craftsmen, and we didn't want to touch their margins. So what we did is that we took the decision to be extremely open with our community. We wrote a letter, we wrote an email, a newsletter, post on social media. We put our faces in videos saying, guys, this is what is happening. These are the new prices of the raw materials. So what we did is that we cut our margins, but we do not want to hit the value chain. So you will find that the same bra that yesterday you were buying for 59 euros, starting from next week, it's going to be 63. We are sorry about this. And we had to do that right before the sales. So we wanted to say that because we didn't want the clients to think that we rose the prices to then, apply the sales. So we were super transparent. And without even sending out to the press, we realized that some of the clients, they sent our communication to the press and it ended up on many magazines
yeah.
in Italy. Like Vogue, for example, they also wrote an article about that. So authenticity is the key, and social media, they can be extremely powerful in that sense. What I do not like about brands is when they treat social media as a sort of like catalog or lookbook, because they show nothing. They're just like nice pictures, but they don't tell me anything about who you really are. What are your values? What is your story? What do you believe in? Why have you launched the brand? What do you want to do with the brand? What is your vision and your mission? Those are the most important things. And from my point of view, the product is somehow a result. So first of all, you need to have very clear in mind your DNA, and your DNA is made up by all of this. And then once you find your DNA, you find the tone of voice, the product, how you want to communicate, and who you want to communicate to. Social media is extremely important, and influencer marketing, if done properly, is again, from my point of view, very important.
I mean, could you talk us through what your strategy was for using influencer marketing?
Absolutely. Again, we did a lot of back and forth. So we changed the strategies a few times. And we also saw influencer marketing changing dramatically over the years. Just, I'm not sure if you're aware of what happened in Italy with the Chiara Marconi case. It keeps changing. Influencer marketing keeps changing. At the very beginning, so in 2019, we developed a strategy that we kept for a while, and it was made up by sending just gift, so not paying big influencers, just to get their feedback. So it was very open and honest, saying, "It's me, Federica. This is us. This is our brand. What do you think about it?" And then the big influencers, most of times they do not convert into sales, but they're very important in terms of brand awareness and brand positioning. The middle, let's say mid influencers from 50K followers onwards, they usually are the one that converts the most. So when we had to invest money, we were rather working with them because they're still able to keep some authenticity in how they promote the product. And then there are the nano and micro influencers. In that case, we were mostly working with like affiliation codes. What we saw, however, is that for the first few years, it was quite easy to track conversion. So when the right influencer that is correctly aligned with you was posting, most of the times we were getting conversion and sales. Again, we never sent brief because that was our decisions. We didn't want to feel like the influencer that were somehow acting or saying things that they had to read. So we never gave briefs. We always only sent out products with all the informations, everything, all they had all the informations available, and then it was up to them to say whatever they wanted to say or if they wanted to say it. And then things changed. Conversion, the ability of influencer to convert, it started to diminish very much. So I got to the point of saying, okay, I can no longer afford this in terms of investment. And then after 6 months, I realized that again, I made a mistake because it was better, even though you're not getting a direct conversion, it still allows people to have your brand on their mind. So it's very important to make sure that the new clients that you haven't converted yet, you are on their mind. And to do this, influencer marketing, again, done properly, is, from my point of view, super important.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that it's always a bit of a challenge that you highlight there. I mean, authenticity again is so important. You don't want, consumers can I think smell when scripts have been given to influencers, but then at the same time, you want to give influencers the space and the kind of the oxygen to, if you like, be an authentic sounding board for your product. But on the other hand, then it opens you up to some risks that there are some messages relating to your product going out to the marketplace that you had not intended. In that sense, the influencer is a bit of a filter, and that filters can cut one of two ways. Did you ever run into sort of a situation where the messaging wasn't exactly what you wanted to see?
Absolutely, yes. So the main problem that we had is that most of the influencers, they were not able to pronounce the name of the brand correctly.
Yeah.
So talking about mistakes, the name of the brand, even though it was considered a cute name, it was extremely hard to pronounce. So it's 'cause it's pronounced Chitè, but most of the Italians, they, I don't know why, but they pronounce it Chitè as if it was
Oh,
French. So we developed a campaign for social media of people saying, like, pronouncing in the proper way, which is actually something that Versace did as well, because I know you tend to say Versace, whereas it's
Right.
Versace. But for us, the difference between Chitè and Chitè is quite different. So that was one of the main issues, for example. And then the other second problem is that we were not using silk because silk is not as sustainable as the product that we were using was. We were using satin. This is because the silk comes always, it's no longer available in Italy. So even the raw material to produce the silk in Italy comes from China. And so, in terms of CO2 consumption, it was absolutely useless for us. It didn't make sense if we want to be sustainable. So, we moved to recycled satin. And most of the influencers that thought it was silk says we
Mm.
had to develop a strong campaign, in an educational campaign, I would say, also in those terms.
Oh, wow, I think these are the types of risks that all brands run into. There are some perceptions out there, particularly the consumers on the younger end of the demographic have a strong preference for sustainable goods and may be willing to pay premium prices. On the other hand, there's evidence maybe that's not the case given the surge in demand for fast fashion, which doesn't seem to be leveling off. I wonder if you could talk about what your thinking was on sustainability and how that resonated with your consumers.
Sure. We were born sustainable. For us, it was one of the most important values. We never thought about doing something that was not sustainable. But on the other hand, you need to be aware that even the fact that you're breathing makes you, you always need to find a balance. And for us, I realized that I guided a lot my team in terms of identifying the buyer personas because clients change over time. And if a brand is able to persist over time, the clients that at the beginning were maybe the younger consumers, then they become your main consumers and trends they keep changing. So we knew that our core clients were women aged 28 to 45, but at the end of the day, that it was very stretched. We had younger consumers, we had older consumers, and we were able to identify how they were buying. Some of them were buying online, some offline, some both of them. So investing a lot in data and understanding your clients is super important. And we got to the point of understanding that, for example, for the older generation, what was most important was the quality rather than the fabric that we were using. It was very much different for millennials. Millennials, they were looking for the style and possibly sustainability. Younger consumers, they were absolutely 100% looking for sustainability. And from their point of view, sustainability, it's not only the fabrics that you use, but your values as a brand. So, how you communicate. If you make a mistake, communication mistake that is not aligned to your values, or if it lacks inclusivity, for example, or if somehow they feel you are reaching your own values, they are there to point at you and tell you, what are you doing? So sustainability, it's a state of mind, probably. It's a whole set of values that you apply to how you do your job. So it's not only how you do your product, but how you build your brand, what you communicate, and what products you do. Again, it was not always easy to find the right balance because, for example, we know that for Italian clients, they don't really care if it's made in Italy. For example, made in Italy in terms of luxury positioning is much more important abroad. You may just step in Germany, which is our neighbor, and made in Italy is so much more important than made in Italy for Italians. Italians, they care that is made properly, that made in an artisanal way. But if it was made in Portugal, it would probably be the same. So from my point of view, it's up to the founders. It's the values that you want to believe and you want to take on with your product and your communication.
That's fantastic. And I think that's such a great point. Maybe what is a unique identifying element of an Italian consumer versus you identify German, and certainly in the case of an American consumer, I think labels are very important. As you say, made in Italy tends to be one of those labels. And maybe some of the time there's less of a focus on exactly the production process that went into that. So I think that's a kind of a unique element that you flag there. Sustainability for you, I think it's clear from this discussion. These were not marketing gimmicks. These were not things that you look to incorporate just to adhere to some external standard. These were at the DNA of your product, which is to say you didn't appear to have an authenticity strategy. You were just honest. And that's why it was authentic, because
Absolutely.
what you said was true. You didn't try to be sustainable to meet a regulatory standard. The DNA of your product was sustainable, and your customers trusted that because they trusted the authenticity of your message. And I think that for younger entrepreneurs, what advice would you provide to those who are looking to be inspired while aspiring to achieve what you were able to do at Chitè?
My motto is know your numbers. I didn't study economics because I really did not want to step into the business industry, and I ended up doing that. And now, when I launched there, I literally knew nothing. I couldn't even open Excel, let alone writing a business plan. And then I realized how numbers are important. And we are in the digital era, we are in the data era. I'm not talking about those numbers, those are important, but they can be taken into consideration in phase 2, 3, 4, 5. But since the very beginning, because I talked to a lot of new designers, as I mentioned before, they come from fashion schools, which I really admire because I'm not a creative person. I wish I was, so they have my most profound admiration. But they need to understand that fashion is not only art. It is art. What we see on the red carpet, what we see during fashion shows, this is art, and it needs to remain. It's an heritage. But if you want to create a brand, the first thing that you need to understand is, are people going to buy your product? And to understand if people are going to buy your product, you need to understand if the price is working, if the whole mechanism behind that to create a product is sustainable in terms of, can it be maintained? Can it be alive? Is it something scalable? Is it something that can grow? Way too often, I see young designers launching their brands, not even considering the margins. For example, you need to understand if you want to, what is your distribution model? Do you want to go through the wholesale process, or do you want to use marketplace, or is it just a direct to consumer, which I would strongly do not recommend in the omnichannel era that we're living in. So if you're looking for an omnichannel approach, it means that you need to have a cost structure of the price of your products that can go through all of them. And I see way too often young designers creating products, starting with friends and family, which absolutely makes sense at the first, you know, at the beginning. But then they realize they do not have the margins to get into the wholesale industry. And and then what do? You either double your prices, or you need to change your product, or you need to change your supply chain. So take your time before launching your brand, think wisely, and if you're not a guru of numbers, find someone who's able to sit down with you, give you feedback, and help you understanding the price model and all the numbers.
Great. Listen, that's fantastic advice. And as an economist, I appreciate that. Look, it's art, it has a heritage, but at the end of the day, there's a business component, and the art it's got to survive the rigors of the challenges you've identified: rising prices, managing suppliers, knowing how to adjust marketing spend, and all of that. So the advice from Chiara Marconi for aspiring entrepreneurs, designers out there is not just know your art, but know the numbers, or at least know how to source somebody who can plug in those numbers for you.
Absolutely.
Listen, I've really enjoyed our conversation today. I've learned so much from this discussion, not just on about your adventure, but about the marketplace in Italy. So I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Bryce. I'm really excited to be on this podcast, and I cannot wait to see you in the States next year and get to know a little bit more about the American industry from your point of view.
Wonderful. I look forward to that as well. Thank you so much, Chiara. Thank you for joining us for another great discussion as part of FSW Conversations. For deeper analysis and insights, please visit Fashion Strategy Weekly at fashionstrategyweekly.com, a media publication of strategy agency It's a Working Title. For questions, comments, and concerns, please reach out to our media team at info@itsworkingtitle.com. This podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all of your favorite podcasting platforms.